Hi, I'm Cheryl from the Sewing Room channel. Many of you have expressed enthusiasm for the beginner's sampler quilt. So before I go over what you need for this project, I'm going to show you a sample of a sampler quilt that I made a few years ago that's somewhat similar to the one that we're working on now. Okay, so let's take a look at it, okay? Okay, what it is these are 12.5-inch finished size blocks. There are 3 across and there will be 4 going lengthwise. So it's 3 by 4, 12 blocks. In between the blocks, all around, is this white fabric. This is called sashing. And in the beginner sampler quilt, you will have strips of sashing going through the quilt like this, except for one thing. And if you'll look up here a little bit, there's these squares, okay? These are 2.5-inch squares. It will not be in the sampler quilt, but if you want to put it in there, then review the video Quilt Sashing Lesson 2, and I explain in great detail how to do this. Okay, so let's go down here to the border. All right, here is a 6-inch finished size border. Now you can make your border bigger than this if you want, but if you want to just make a small lap quilt size, you can stop your quilt right here at the edge of the sashing and then put your binding on. So you have a couple of choices on how big you want to make this. Now let's look at the binding. You'll see these different color strips of fabric. Those were scraps left over from the blocks that are in the quilt, and I just stitched them all together and made binding out of it. But you can just select one color if you like to use as your binding. Okay, let's go over the supply list. This is what you're going to need without the border. So the finished size will be 44 by 58. This makes a nice lap quilt. You can keep it on your sofa, in a chair, so it just fits over your legs. You're going to need a piece of fabric A and B. They're going to be the same amount, 1/3 yard. Now I'm adding in a little extra for cutting mistakes that you probably will make, because I still do. After all my years of sewing, I still cut things wrong, okay? So I always purchase a little more than I think I need. Now your fabric C is always going to be your background fabric, and it will be 1 2/3 yards. On your binding, you're going to need 1/2 yard, and then for your cotton batting and the fabric for the back of the quilt, 48 by 62 inches. But don't purchase this yet. Wait till you have all of your blocks and sashing pieced together before you do this, because you want to measure your quilt and make sure you get enough. If you don't know how to cut out your quilt fabric, watch the video Tips for Cutting Quilt Fabric. Here's a video on binding, and then 2 videos on sashing. So watch those in your spare time so you kind of have a heads up as to what's coming on down the road. Let's look at the list with the border. Okay, the finished size is 56 by 70. Remember, you can make your border bigger if you like. The fabrics for A, B, and C are the same as in the other supply list. That has not changed. Your border, you'll need about 1 2/3 yard of fabric. Your binding, 1 yard. And then for your cotton batting and backing fabric, 62 by 74 inches. Remember, don't cut this out or purchase it until you've finished your quilt top piece. Okay? All right, so now I want to give you a little word of advice, especially if you are a beginner. You have never hardly ever done any sewing at all, especially in quilting. Okay, so I recommend that you purchase fat quarters. You can make each sampler block out of fat quarters like this, okay? You can select an A fabric like this multicolored print, and then select your B and C from what's in here, okay? And you can make one whole block just out of these colors, and then the next time I release a video and there's a new block, you can buy 3 more fat quarters. So, fat quarters are very economical, and you can buy a little at a time and also buy them on sale, okay? You could save a lot buying them on sale. Another tip, go to the clearance section in your fabric store, okay? There's always some good stuff back there. A lot of my videos, I've used clearance fabric. I've gotten some great stuff in that clearance section. Now, also a lot of your major fabric stores have coupons. I sign up for the email list, the text messaging list. I use those all the time. I never go in there without them. Another way of getting a discount is my husband had been in the military, and sometimes I can get a military discount. So there are times you need your husband to go with you to the fabric store, okay? Just drag him along, okay? Now, there's also a major retail discount store throughout the United States, and some of them have fabric departments, and they sell sewing supplies. They don't have a big variety, but their fabric and tools are half the price of what you would find in a regular fabric store. So check them out, okay? Now, let's go over the tools that you will need. A rotary cutter. Now, there's 2 different sizes. This is the one I use the most. It's a 60 millimeter. Here's a 45 millimeter. This is less expensive, about half the price of what this one is, and also the blades are a little cheaper. But the blades don't last as long as these, but you do save a lot of money in the end. This is the one I would say that most people buy when they're first starting out. So I recommend that one if you're just getting started. I always keep a small pair of scissors at the table, sewing machine. I rarely use large scissors anymore for anything. A seam ripper is a must, and tweezers. Why tweezers? Because sometimes fabric jams in the sewing machine and I can pull it out easier. And also when you use your seam ripper, this helps you pull out all the little pieces of thread, okay? Let's look at rulers. Here is a 24 by 6.5 inch width ruler. This is the first one I started out with. I do not recommend you buy the little 2-inch wide ruler. It's very hard to control, and you'll make a lot of mistakes with that ruler. So if you're gonna buy one, get the 6.5 inch width. Now, when I discovered this 8.5 inch width, this is the one I use the most now, okay? But if you're just getting started, buy this 6.5 inch width ruler. Now, square rulers, I highly recommend a 12.5 inch square ruler. You can square up most of your blocks by using this one, and it's a lot easier to square a block when you have a square ruler. Another ruler that I use quite frequently is the 6.5 inch. Let me get this out of the way. The 6.5 inch square ruler, okay? Now remember, if you're just getting started, buy the 24 by 6.5 and the 12.5 inch square and the 45 millimeter rotary cutter. One more thing is a must for quilting, and that is a rotary cutter, okay? This is the first, not a rotary cutter, a cutting mat, I'm sorry. This is the first cutting mat I ever purchased. It is 11 by 17. I do not recommend you buy one this small. You will really struggle with this. So when you go to buy a cutting mat, check out that discount store, or take a coupon with you to some of your fabric stores, get it half off, and buy the biggest one you can afford. Okay? Now, I hope you take on this project. You will really learn a lot, and I think it will be overall an enjoyable experience for you. Now, if you have any questions, any suggestions, or you need help on a project you're working on, leave a comment in the comment section. I try to answer all of them if I can. Now, to keep informed on my future videos, click on one of my subscribe buttons. There's one down there and one up there. Click on either one of those and make sure you enter your email address. Now, I'm Cheryl. I have got a lot more videos coming out really soon. So I'm Cheryl again. I'll see you next time, and happy sewing.